My name is Maya Chen, and until last Tuesday, my mother introduced me to people as my daughter, who's still figuring things out. I'm 28. I live in Seattle, and for the past 6 years, I've been building something my family considers a hobby. While my older brother Derek expanded our family's manufacturing business in Portland, I've been coding in coffee shops, pitching to investors, and sleeping on my office couch more nights than I care to admit. My mother, Linda, made it crystal clear at every family gathering that Derek was the success story, the one carrying on Dad's legacy, while I was the one who ran off to play with computers. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The Chen family operates like a corporation with an unspoken hierarchy. Derek sits at the top as the heir apparent, expanding Chen Enterprises with steady contracts and traditional manufacturing principles Dad taught him. I occupy the bottom rung, the daughter who abandoned the family business to chase what Mom calls Silicon Valley fantasies. Every Sunday dinner becomes a performance where Derek updates everyone on quarterly profits while I listen to passive-aggressive comments about my phase that's lasted longer than anyone expected. Growing up in Portland's suburbs, I learned early that love in our house came with conditions. Derek earned praise for his business acumen and practical thinking. I earned tolerance for my grades and quiet compliance. When Derek announced he was taking over operations at Chen Enterprises after Dad's heart attack 3 years ago, the family celebrated with champagne and tears of joy. When I told them I was moving to Seattle to start TechFlow Solutions, Mom asked if I needed money for rent and suggested I keep my marketing degree as backup. The pattern established itself like clockwork. Derek would call Mom every morning to discuss business strategy and family investments. I would call every few days to hear about Derek's latest achievement, secondhand. Derek bought Mom a new car. When his first major contract came through, I sent flowers on her birthday and got a text saying, "Lovely, dear," with no follow-up questions about my life. Derek's girlfriend Rachel became the daughter Mom never had, joining shopping trips and planning family events. My relationships barely registered as conversation topics, dismissed as distractions from my real life that would eventually bring me home. TechFlow started in a shared workspace above a coffee roastery, just me and my laptop, building a AI-powered logistics software that could revolutionize supply chain management. The irony wasn't lost on me that my family's manufacturing business could benefit enormously from what I was creating. But every time I tried to explain the technology, Dad would nod politely while Mom changed the subject to Derek's expansion plans. I learned to stop mentioning venture capital meetings or development milestones. Instead, I'd listen to updates about Derek's networking successes and bite my tongue when Mom bragged about his real business sense. The distance between Portland and Seattle became more than geographic. I'd drive down for mandatory family gatherings, sitting through dinners where Derek commanded attention with stories about new clients while I fielded questions about whether I was eating enough and meeting nice people. Aunt Patricia would ask when I planned to settle down with something stable. Aunt Susan would wonder aloud if I missed working with family. Uncle Tony, Dad's quieter brother, occasionally asked genuine questions about my work, but his curiosity always got overshadowed by Derek's latest announcement. 2 years ago, when TechFlow landed its first major client, a logistics company processing millions in daily transactions, I called home, excited to share the news. Mom listened for 30 seconds before interrupting to tell me Derek had just signed a contract worth twice my entire annual revenue. When I tried to explain that software scaling works differently than manufacturing, that my client base was growing exponentially, she said it was nice that I was making pocket money with my computers, but reminded me that Derek was building something permanent, something that employed real people in real jobs. Last Christmas epitomized everything wrong with our family dynamic. Derek arrived with Rachel, announcing their engagement and their plans to expand Chen Enterprises into 3 new states. Mom wept with joy. Dad opened expensive wine, and everyone toasted the future of the family legacy. I sat at the far end of the table, watching them plan a business expansion that could have been enhanced by technology I'd already developed. Technology sitting unused while they celebrated solutions I could have provided months earlier. Breaking points started building during spring family dinners. When Mom began inviting Aunt Patricia and Aunt Susan specifically to witness Derek's success stories. They'd arrive armed with questions about his business, prepared to offer advice about family legacy and traditional values. Meanwhile, I'd endure sideways comments about my alternative lifestyle and suggestions that I consider returning to school for something more practical. The conversations followed scripts written years earlier, where Derek played the starring role, and I served his cautionary tale about wandering too far from family expectations. 3 months ago, Mom started, ending our phone calls with variations of the same message. She worried about my future, wondered if I was really happy living so far from family. Suggested that Derek could probably find me a position at Chen Enterprises if I was ready to come home and contribute to something meaningful. The subtext landed clearly. My choices disappointed her. My independence looked like failure. My definition of success didn't align with values she recognized or respected. Jessica Rodriguez became my personal assistant 8 months ago, initially handling scheduling and correspondence while TechFlow grew beyond what one person could manage alone. She organized my chaotic calendar, filtered my emails, and gradually became the only person who truly understood the scope of what we were building. Jessica saw the late nights, the investor calls, the technical breakthroughs, and the mounting pressure I carried from family obligations that felt increasingly disconnected from my actual life. Last Monday morning started like any other day. Except Jessica's expression when I walked into the office carried weight I couldn't immediately identify. The call from Mom came on a Wednesday evening while I was debugging code that had kept me awake for 3 straight nights. TechFlow was hemorrhaging money faster than I could raise it, and our biggest client was threatening to pull their contract unless we solved a critical integration issue. I almost let the call go to voicemail, but guilt won over exhaustion. Honey, I need to ask you something. Mom's voice carried that particular tone she used when she was about to request a favor disguised as family obligation. Derek's been looking at some property for the new warehouse expansion, but the down payment is more than we anticipated. Your father and I were wondering if you could help with a loan, just temporarily until the bank finalizes everything. I stared at my laptop screen, watching lines of code blur together while calculating numbers in my head. The amount she mentioned represented nearly everything in my business savings account. Money I'd earmarked for hiring 2 developers who could help solve our current crisis. But this was family, and Derek's expansion represented everything they valued about success and stability. How much time would you need before paying it back? I asked, already knowing I'd say yes despite the timing being catastrophic for my own company. Probably 6 months at most. Derek's so confident about these new contracts, and you know how conservative the banks are with approval timelines. We just need bridge funding from someone who believes in family. The word family landed like a guilt-laden weight. One transferred. The money that night, watching my account balance drop to levels that would make the next 3 months terrifying if TechFlow couldn't stabilize revenue immediately. I didn't mention my own financial pressures or the developers I couldn't hire because of this loan. Instead, I told Mom I was happy to help and asked her to keep me updated on Derek's progress. You're such a good sister, she said, and for a moment, I felt included in something meaningful. Derek will be so grateful. This expansion is going to change everything for our family. 2 weeks later, Derek called me directly, which happened so rarely I initially worried someone was sick. His voice carried excitement barely contained by professional composure. Maya, I wanted to thank you personally for helping with the warehouse funding. Mom told me you came through without hesitation, and that means everything to me. This expansion is going to triple our capacity and open doors we've been working toward for years. I'm glad I could help, I said, genuinely meaning it despite my bank account hovering dangerously close to operational minimums. Family supports family. Exactly. I want you to know that once everything's settled, maybe we can explore ways for TechFlow to work with Chen Enterprises. I've been thinking about what you do, and there might be opportunities for collaboration. The possibility energized me more than caffeine. Us. If Derek seriously considered integrating my logistics software with their operations, it could solve both our company's challenges while finally demonstrating to the family that my work had legitimate value. I spent the following week preparing presentations and technical demonstrations, imagining family dinners where my contributions earned the same respect as Derek's achievements. But weeks passed without follow-up conversations. When I called Derek's office, his assistant said he was traveling for client meetings. When I asked Mom about potential collaboration between our companies, she said Derek was too busy with expansion logistics to consider new projects right now. The loan had served its purpose, but the promised partnership seemed to evaporate like steam. Meanwhile, TechFlow's crisis deepened. Without the additional developers, our team couldn't solve the integration problems fast enough to satisfy our major client. Jessica worked overtime coordinating damage control while I pushed existing staff beyond reasonable limits. We were bleeding. Talent as burned-out programmers found less stressful positions elsewhere, and every departure made our technical challenges exponentially more difficult. "Maya, we need to talk about cash flow projections," Jessica said during one of our increasingly frequent emergency meetings. "If we don't land another major contract within 60 days, we'll have to consider significantly reducing staff or shutting down operations entirely." I had nightmares about calling Mom to explain that TechFlow was failing while Derek's expansion flourished with funding I'd provided. The family narrative would write itself. The responsible son succeeds with traditional business principles, while the daughter's risky venture collapses predictably. I'd become living proof that straying from family wisdom leads to inevitable failure. 3 months after providing the loan, I finally gathered courage to ask Derek about repayment timelines. His response came via text message rather than phone call. "Expansion costs exceeded projections. Need more time for loan repayment? We'll update when cash flow stabilizes." The casual dismissal stung worse than outright refusal. Derek could afford to delay repayment because he knew I wouldn't pressure family members or create conflict during an already stressful period. My financial desperation remained invisible to everyone except Jessica, who watched me skip meals to save money while working 18-hour days to salvage our failing company. Thanksgiving dinner became theater, where I performed the role of supportive sister while internally calculating how many weeks TechFlow could survive without additional funding. Derek dominated conversation with updates about the warehouse expansion, new equipment purchases, and hiring plans enabled by the loan I'd provided. Mom beamed with pride, while Aunt Patricia and Aunt Susan asked detailed questions about his business strategy and growth projections. "And Maya's been such a help with the initial funding," Derek mentioned casually, raising his wine glass in my direction. "Family supporting family. That's how real businesses succeed." Everyone smiled and nodded approvingly, but no one asked about my company's challenges or whether the loan was creating hardship for me. It was cast as the generous supporting character in Derek's success story. It's valuable for my contribution, but not interesting enough to merit individual attention or concern. "It's wonderful that you can help your brother build something lasting," Aunt Susan said, patting my hand maternally. "There's real satisfaction in contributing to family legacy, even if it's not directly your own project." The implication landed. Clearly, my value lay in enabling Derek's achievements, rather than pursuing independent success. TechFlow wasn't dismissed as worthless, exactly, but treated as supplementary to the main narrative of family business expansion and traditional success metrics. That night, sat in my childhood bedroom calculating worst-case scenarios, while Derek's laughter echoed from downstairs, where he was showing Dad architectural plans for the new warehouse. The money I'd provided was transforming Derek's vision into concrete reality while my own company teetered on the edge of bankruptcy. I'd chosen family loyalty over business survival, and the decision was slowly strangling everything I'd worked to build. The first sign something had shifted came during Mom's weekly call in January. Usually she'd spend 10 minutes updating me on Derek's latest achievements before asking perfunctory questions about my health and social life. This time, her voice carried an edge of irritation that immediately put me on alert. "Maya, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," she began, skipping her usual pleasantries. "Are you struggling financially? Because Derek mentioned that you've been asking about the loan repayment and we're concerned. You might be in over your head with that company of yours." Hey, the question hit like a slap. I'd asked Derek once via text about potential repayment timelines after my accountant warned that TechFlow's cash flow couldn't sustain much longer without additional capital. Somehow, that single inquiry had been transformed into evidence of my financial desperation and poor business judgment. Managing fine, Mom. I was just trying to plan my budget for the quarter, said, keeping my voice steady despite the humiliation burning in my chest. Standard business practice to track outstanding loans. Well, Derek thinks you might be putting too much pressure on yourself trying to make that technology thing work. He's worried you're going to exhaust your savings chasing something that might not be realistic long term. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The irony was staggering. Derek was worried about my financial stability while using my money to expand his business, apparently without any urgency about repayment. My inquiry about the loan had been reframed as evidence of my company's weakness, rather than acknowledgement of Derek's delayed obligation. Mom, TechFlow is profitable. We've had some temporary cash flow challenges because I helped Derek with his expansion, but the business fundamentals are solid. I tried to inject confidence into my voice while staring at Jessica's latest financial projections that painted an increasingly dire picture. Honey, I know you want to believe that, but Derek's been in business much longer than you have. He thinks maybe it's time to consider whether you're throwing good money after bad. Now, there's no shame in admitting when something isn't working. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with Mom gently suggesting that I might be too close to the situation to see clearly. She mentioned that Derek had offered to help me find a position at Chen Enterprises if I was ready to transition back to stable employment. The subtext was unmistakable. My family viewed TechFlow as an expensive hobby that was finally revealing its true nature as financial folly. After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at Seattle's skyline while processing the conversation's implications. My request for loan repayment had been transformed into evidence of business failure. Derek's delay in repayment had been reframed as concern for my welfare. Somehow I'd become the problem that needed solving rather than the creditor, waiting for repayment. The following week brought a carefully orchestrated family intervention disguised as casual concern. Aunt Patricia called to check on my situation, having heard from Mom that I might be struggling. Aunt Susan sent a long email about the importance of knowing when to cut losses and pivot toward more realistic goals. Even Dad, who rarely involved himself in family dynamics, left a voicemail suggesting that I consider Derek's offer seriously because family businesses offer security that startups can't guarantee. The messaging was coordinated and consistent. My financial inquiry had exposed TechFlow's underlying weakness, and the family was rallying to help me face reality before I lost everything chasing an impossible dream. Derek positioned himself as the concerned brother offering salvation through stable employment, while Mom cast herself as the worried mother, trying to protect her daughter from inevitable failure. It's like they've decided your company is failing, and they're all rushing to comfort you, Jessica observed during one of our morning strategy sessions. Except your company isn't actually failing. You're just waiting for a loan repayment that would solve your immediate cash flow problems. Jessica's outside perspective clarified something I'd been too close to see. The family narrative required my business to be struggling in order to justify Derek's delayed repayment and position him as my potential rescuer. If TechFlow was genuinely successful, Derek's inability to repay the loan looked irresponsible rather than protective. If I was desperate for money, his offer of employment looked generous rather than condescending. February brought escalation. Derek called me directly, his voice heavy with brotherly concern and professional authority. Maya, I've been thinking about our conversation at Thanksgiving, and I'm worried you're not being completely honest with yourself about TechFlow's prospects. Mom mentioned you've been stressed about money, and I want you to know there's no judgment here. Sometimes the best entrepreneurs are the ones who know when to fold and move on to something better. Derek, I appreciate your concern, but TechFlow isn't failing. We're navigating normal startup challenges while waiting for that loan repayment. You mentioned, once we have that capital back, we can invest in the development resources we need to scale properly. His pause lasted long enough for me to hear office noise in the background before he responded with measured patience. Sister, I think you might be too invested emotionally to see the bigger picture. I've been running businesses longer than You have, and I recognize the signs when someone's pouring money into a sinking ship. The loan you provided helped save Chen Enterprises from a cash flow crisis. And now I'm trying to return the favor by offering you a way out before you lose everything. The revelation landed like a physical blow. Derek had just admitted that Chen Enterprises had been facing a cash flow crisis when they requested my loan. But somehow my current cash flow challenges made me financially irresponsible while his had been temporary business needs. The double standard was breathtaking in its audacity. So Chen Enterprises was in crisis when you needed my money, but TechFlow's current challenges mean I should abandon the company? I asked, barely controlling my anger. That's completely different, Maya. We have established revenue streams and proven business models. You're trying to build something from scratch in a highly competitive market with no guarantee of success. There's a difference between temporary cash flow management and fundamental business viability. The conversation continued for another 30 minutes, with Derek explaining why his financial challenges had been legitimate while mine indicated poor judgment. He painted himself as the experienced businessman trying to save his naive sister from inevitable failure, never acknowledging that his expansion had been funded entirely by money borrowed from the company he now characterized as doomed. That evening, I called Uncle Tony, hoping for a perspective from someone less invested in the family's established narratives. His response surprised me with its directness. Maya, I've been watching this situation develop, and I think you should know what people are saying behind your back. Derek's been telling everyone that you're struggling financially and might lose your company if you don't get help soon. He's positioning himself as the responsible brother who's going to rescue you from your poor business decisions. The only reason I'm struggling is because I lent him money that he hasn't repaid, he said, feeling like I was stating the obvious. I know that, and you know that. But Derek's version sounds more compelling to people who don't understand your business. He's making it seem like you're desperate and he's generous, rather than acknowledging that you're his creditor waiting for repayment. Uncle Tony's words crystallized something that had been nagging at me for weeks. The family wasn't genuinely concerned about my welfare. They were participating in a narrative that made Derek look heroic while positioning me as the family member who needed rescue. My success would complicate that story, so my struggles were emphasized while my achievements were minimized or ignored entirely. The pattern extended beyond immediate family. Cousin Rachel started sending me job listings for marketing positions at established companies, accompanied by messages about the importance of financial stability. Even Nana Rose, during our monthly phone call, mentioned that Derek was worried about me and suggested I might be happier working with family rather than facing the stress of running my own business. The isolation was methodical and complete. Every family member had been briefed on my supposed financial crisis and Derek's generous offer to help. My version of events, where I was simply waiting for loan repayment before reinvesting in growth, was dismissed as denial or delusion. The family had collectively decided that TechFlow was failing, and any evidence to the contrary was reframed as my inability to face reality. By March, the narrative had solidified into family lore that would be repeated at every gathering for years to come. Derek had saved Maya from financial ruin by offering her stable employment when her risky business venture inevitably collapsed. The story required my cooperation to reach its satisfying conclusion, and my continued resistance was becoming increasingly inconvenient for everyone involved. The annual Chen family reunion happens every March at Riverside Park, a tradition Mom instituted 15 years ago to maintain connections across 3 generations. This year, she'd invited extended family from California and Arizona, turning what was usually a casual gathering into a showcase event. Derek would unveil architectural models of his warehouse expansion. Dad would grill salmon on the family barbecue, and I would presumably announce my decision to join Chen Enterprises after TechFlow's inevitable collapse. Arrived at the park pavilion carrying a laptop bag and a knot of anxiety that had been tightening for weeks. The family had spent months crafting a narrative where my attendance would serve as public acknowledgement of business failure and grateful acceptance of Derek's rescue offer. Every conversation, every phone call, every seemingly casual check-in had been building toward this moment of collective vindication. Mom intercepted me at the pavilion entrance, her smile bright, but her eyes carrying unmistakable warning. Maya. Honey, I'm so glad you came. Derek's been telling everyone about the position he's created for you at the company. Marketing director with full benefits and profit sharing. Isn't that wonderful? The announcement hit like ice water. Derek had apparently been telling people I'd already accepted a job that had never been formally offered, creating expectations I was now expected to fulfill. The family was gathering to celebrate my homecoming to the fold. My abandonment of unrealistic dreams and Derek's magnanimous gesture in saving me from financial ruin. Mom, I haven't accepted any position. We've only had preliminary conversations about potential collaboration between our companies. I kept my voice low, hoping to avoid creating a scene before understanding the full scope of what Derek had orchestrated. Her face tightened with the particular expression she wore when I disappointed her in public settings. Sweetheart, Derek explained everything to us. He knows you're struggling financially because of that computer business, and he's found a way to help you transition back to stable work. Everyone's so proud of him for taking care of family. Aunt Patricia approached before I could respond, her arms extended for an embrace that felt more like a trap. Maya, dear, we're all so relieved that Derek found a solution for your situation. It must be such a weight off your shoulders to know you won't have to worry about money anymore. The phrasing made me sound like a charity case rather than a business owner. But before I could correct the mischaracterization, Aunt Susan joined the conversation with her trademark blend of concern and condescension. I always worried about you trying to compete in that technology world. It's so cutthroat and unpredictable. It's much better to work with family where you'll be appreciated and secure. Cousin Rachel materialized with her phone already recording, apparently planning to document my grateful acceptance speech for social media posterity. The entire gathering had been choreographed around a moment that existed only in Derek's imagination. But the family's investment in this narrative made contradiction increasingly difficult. Derek himself stood across the pavilion surrounded by uncles and male cousins, gesturing enthusiastically at architectural drawings spread across a picnic table. He looked confident and successful, the undisputed family hero, who had solved multiple problems with characteristic wisdom and generosity. His expansion project was thriving thanks to my funding, and now he was rescuing me from the consequences of my poor business judgment. Where should we set up for the announcement? Rachel asked. Still filming? Derek thought maybe by the lake where the lighting is better. The presumption was staggering. They'd planned a ceremonial moment where I would publicly thank Derek for his offer and announce my decision to abandon TechFlow in favor of stable employment. The family would witness my capitulation to their superior judgment, validate their concerns about my risky choices, and celebrate Derek's role as problem solver and family protector. Derek's group laptop bag slung over my shoulder, like armor. The men stopped talking as I approached, their expressions mixing curiosity with anticipation. Dad smiled nervously, clearly hoping I would cooperate with whatever Derek had planned rather than create conflict at a family gathering. Derek, I think we need to clarify something, I said, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding. My system. You've been telling people I'm joining Chen Enterprises, but we haven't actually discussed terms or timeline for any position. His smile remained fixed, but his eyes flickered with annoyance at my failure to follow the script. We've talked about this several times. You mentioned financial pressures. I offered solutions. I thought we had an understanding, talked about potential collaboration between our companies. I never indicated interest in becoming your employee. Uncle Mike, Dad's brother, cleared his throat uncomfortably. Maybe you two should work out the details privately. But Derek apparently decided that public pressure would be more effective than private negotiation. Sister, I think you might be misremembering our conversations. You called me about loan repayment because TechFlow was struggling, remember? I offered you a way to solve those problems permanently rather than just temporarily. The reframing was masterful. Derek had transformed my inquiry about loan repayment into evidence of business failure, my request for collaboration into plea for employment, and his delayed repayment into generous rescue effort. The family watched this exchange with growing discomfort, but their sympathies clearly lay with Derek's version of events. Actually, Derek, let me clarify something for everyone, I said. Opening my laptop and connecting to the pavilion's Wi-Fi, TechFlow isn't struggling. We're waiting for you to repay the loan you requested 6 months ago so we can invest in additional development resources. I projected my laptop screen onto the pavilion's mounted display, showing TechFlow's financial dashboard. Revenue graphs trending upward. Client retention rates above industry standards. Profit margins healthy, despite temporary cash flow constraints caused by the outstanding loan to Chen Enterprises. The family stared at the data in confused silence. Derek's narrative required my business to be failing, but the numbers told a different story entirely. TechFlow was growing steadily, limited only by capital constraints that would disappear once Derek honored his repayment obligation. Maya, financial projections can be misleading, Derek said, his voice tight with barely controlled frustration. Revenue doesn't equal profit, and growth doesn't guarantee sustainability. You're absolutely right, I agreed, switching to a different screen. That's why I'm showing actual bank statements, cash flow reports, and client contracts. Is profitable and sustainable. We're just waiting for our loan to be repaid so we can hire additional developers and expand our capabilities. Aunt Patricia looked between Derek and me with growing confusion. I thought Maya was struggling financially. That's why Derek offered her the job. The uncomfortable silence stretched until Uncle Tony spoke from the back of the group. Sounds like Derek borrowed money from Maya and hasn't paid it back yet. That's why she's asking about it. Derek's face flushed with embarrassment and anger. The loan was for family business expansion that benefits everyone. Maya's making it sound like some kind of personal debt. It is a personal debt, I said quietly. TechFlow lent money to Chen Enterprises with the understanding that repayment would occur within 6 months. That timeline expired 2 months ago. The family dynamics shifted visibly as people processed this information. Derek's generous offer to rescue his struggling sister looked different when reframed as an employer trying to hire his creditor. My supposed financial desperation looked different when viewed as a legitimate expectation of loan repayment. Mom stepped forward, her voice sharp with defensive anger. Maya, this is not appropriate dinner conversation. Family financial arrangements shouldn't be discussed publicly. But the damage was done. The carefully constructed narrative of Derek's heroism and my failure was crumbling under the weight of actual facts. The family had gathered to celebrate my capitulation. But instead they were witnessing Derek's discomfort and my refusal to cooperate with their preferred version of reality. I agree completely, Mom, I said, closing my laptop. Family financial arrangements should be handled privately and professionally. When Derek is ready to discuss loan repayment privately, he knows how to reach me. I walked away from the group, leaving Derek to explain why his generous job offer looked more like an attempt to resolve his obligation through employment rather than cash repayment. The reunion continued around me, but the celebration had lost its intended focus. Instead of announcing my grateful acceptance of rescue, I'd exposed the foundation of lies supporting Derek's hero narrative. The drive back to Seattle felt like escaping a crime scene where I'd accidentally become both victim and perpetrator. My phone buzzed relentlessly with calls from family members, each presumably offering their version of damage control or requesting explanation for the public confrontation. I let them all go to voicemail, needing silence to process what had just unfolded and what would inevitably follow. Derek called 17 times before finally leaving a message that dripped with controlled fury. Maya, what you did today was completely inappropriate and embarrassing for the entire family. We'll discuss this privately when you're ready to act like an adult instead of throwing tantrums at family gatherings. Call me back. The voicemail perfectly encapsulated everything wrong with our dynamic. Derek positioned himself as the reasonable adult responding to my childish behavior, completely ignoring that he'd spent months creating false narratives about my business and financial situation. My refusal to cooperate with his preferred storyline was reframed as emotional instability rather than legitimate pushback against manipulation. Mom's message arrived an hour later, her voice tight with disappointment and barely contained anger. Maya Lin Chen, I am mortified by your behavior today. Uncle Mike asked me what's wrong with you, and I didn't know what to say. Derek was trying to help you, and you humiliated him in front of the entire family. You owe him an apology, and you owe all of us an explanation for why you chose to air private business in public. The accusation landed exactly as intended. I'd violated unspoken family rules about maintaining appearances and protecting Derek's reputation, regardless of the underlying truth. My decision to present factual information about loan arrangements was characterized as public humiliation rather than necessary correction of deliberate misinformation. Aunt Patricia's voicemail took a different approach, layering concern with subtle criticism. "Sweetheart, I'm worried about you. Everyone could see how stressed you look today, and Derek is genuinely concerned about your financial situation. Maybe the pressure of running that company is affecting your judgment. Family is supposed to support each other, not create conflict. Call me when you're ready to talk about what's really bothering you." The messaging was coordinated and sophisticated, rather than acknowledging that Derek had lied about our arrangements. The family was closing ranks to protect him while positioning me as the unstable element disrupting their harmony. My exposure of his deception was reframed as evidence of stress-induced poor judgment rather than appropriate response to months of manipulation. Jessica was waiting in my office when I arrived Monday morning, her expression mixing concern with barely contained excitement. "Maya, I've been monitoring the financial news feeds, and there's something you need to see immediately," she said, pulling up several browser windows on her computer. The headlines made my stomach drop. Pinnacle Industries announces acquisition. Strategy for AI logistics platforms. Tech giants seek strategic partnerships and supply chain innovation. Pinnacle CEO identifies TechFlow Solutions as primary target for integration. I read the articles twice before the implications fully registered. Pinnacle Industries, one of the largest logistics companies in North America, had been quietly researching AI-powered supply chain solutions for months. According to their press release, TechFlow's proprietary algorithms represented exactly the technology they needed to revolutionize their operations across 15 countries. "Maya, they want to buy us," Jessica said, her voice filled with awe. "Not just license our software or form a partnership. They want to acquire TechFlow entirely and integrate our technology into their global operations." The preliminary offer outlined in Pinnacle's public statement exceeded my wildest projections for TechFlow's valuation. If negotiations proceeded successfully, the acquisition would generate enough capital to repay Derek's loan 100 times over while establishing me as a significant player in the logistics technology sector. "Has anyone from Pinnacle contacted us directly?" I asked, trying to maintain professional composure while my mind raced through possibilities. "Their legal team called this morning requesting permission to conduct due diligence on our financial records and technical specifications. They want to schedule preliminary meetings this week to discuss terms and timeline." The irony was almost too perfect to believe. While my family gathered to celebrate my business failure and Derek's generous rescue offer, TechFlow was being courted by industry giants who recognized the value of what I'd spent years building. The timing felt like cosmic justice, but I knew better than to count on anything until contracts were signed and money transferred. "Jessica, I need you to handle all communications with Pinnacle's team. Schedule meetings for later this week, but don't mention anything about potential acquisition to anyone outside this office. Not until we understand exactly what they're proposing." She nodded eagerly, already pulling up calendar applications to coordinate schedules. "Maya, there's something else. Derek called the office this morning asking to speak with you about urgent family business. I told him you were unavailable, but he seemed pretty insistent. Derek's urgency probably related to damage control from yesterday's confrontation rather than genuine family concerns. He needed to rebuild his narrative before the family's opinion shifted too dramatically in my favor. And he likely wanted to negotiate some kind of face-saving compromise that would restore his position as the successful sibling offering guidance. To his struggling sister, "If Derek calls again, tell him I'm in meetings all week, but will be available to discuss loan repayment arrangements next Monday. Nothing else requires urgent attention." The rest of the week passed in a blur of conference calls with Pinnacle's executives, technical demonstrations of TechFlow's capabilities, and legal reviews of preliminary acquisition frameworks. Their interest was genuine and their timeline aggressive. They wanted to finalize terms within 60 days to begin integration before the next fiscal quarter. Friday afternoon brought the formal offer. Pinnacle Industries proposed acquiring TechFlow Solutions for an amount that would make me financially independent while positioning our technology as the foundation for their global expansion strategy. The deal included retention bonuses for key staff, consultation agreements for ongoing development, and equity stakes in Pinnacle's logistics division. "Maya, this is life-changing money," Jessica said, reviewing the acquisition documents. "Even after taxes and legal fees, you'll have enough capital to start 10 new companies or retire comfortably at 30. I stared at the numbers, remembering family conversations where Derek dismissed my work as expensive hobby and Mom worried about my financial stability. TechFlow's value exceeded Chen Enterprises' total revenue for the past 3 years generated through technology I'd developed while living on ramen and coffee in a shared workspace above a coffee roastery. "Schedule a board meeting for Monday morning," I told Jessica. "We'll review final terms and vote on acceptance. If everything checks out legally, we'll move forward with the acquisition." My phone buzzed with another call from Derek, the fourth one that week. I let it go to voicemail again, not ready to engage with family drama while navigating the most important business decision of my life. His problems with loan repayment would be resolved soon enough, along with any questions about TechFlow's viability or my business judgment. The weekend passed quietly while I processed the magnitude of what was happening. TechFlow's acquisition would vindicate every risk I'd taken, every sacrifice I'd made, and every family gathering where I'd endured condescending concern about my choices. Derek's expansion project, funded entirely by my loan, would be dwarfed by an acquisition that established me as the family's most successful entrepreneur. Monday morning arrived with crisp Seattle air and unprecedented clarity about my future. Jessica had prepared comprehensive briefing materials for the board meeting. Legal counsel had reviewed every clause of the acquisition agreement, and Pinnacle's executives were standing by for final confirmation. I walked into TechFlow's conference room carrying documents that would transform my life and permanently alter the Chen family dynamics that had defined my identity for 28 years. Derek's narrative about rescuing his struggling sister was about to collide with reality in the most spectacular way possible. Jessica handed me the merger papers with a smile that could have powered the entire building. The documents were thick, official, and represented validation of everything I'd believed about TechFlow's potential, despite my family's skepticism. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.